Captain Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of the UES Defiance, watching the stars drift past through the main display. 50 years had passed since humanity first joined the Galactic Coalition, and she still felt pride every time she saw their flag, flying alongside dozens of alien banners. The Coalition was not like the old empires that some species remembered. It was built on cooperation, not conquest. Trade flowed freely between worlds. Disputes were settled with words, not weapons. And when disasters struck, everyone helped everyone else. Humans had earned their place in this peaceful alliance through actions, not words. When the gas giant storms threatened the floating cities of the Deep Swim, human rescue ships dove into crushing winds to save thousands of aquatic aliens. When volcanic eruptions buried Cathera colonies, human miners worked for weeks to dig survivors from the rubble. When solar flares damaged the crystal bodies of the Zephyrians, human doctors learned entirely new forms of medicine to heal them. Other species joined the coalition for safety or profit. Humans joined because they found friends among the stars. Sarah's crew reflected this spirit perfectly. Her chief engineer was Clictas, a Cathara whose 4 arms could repair systems faster than any human. The insectoid alien had served with her for 8 years, and Sarah trusted him with her life. Her navigator was Deep Current Flowing, one of the Deep Swim whose water-filled suit gleamed blue-green under the bridge lights. The aquatic being could plot courses through space with the same skill his ancestors used to navigate Earth's oceans. At the communication station sat Harmony of Distant Stars, a Zephyrian whose crystalline body rang like bells when she worked. The living crystal could speak to other Zephyrians across vast distances without any technology, making her invaluable for coordination between ships. "Captain," Harmony chimed, her voice like wind through crystal caves. "Distress signal from the Verdani system. Multiple colonies under attack." Sarah straightened in her chair. The Verdani were one of the gentlest species in the coalition. The plant-like beings spent their lives growing food for other worlds, asking nothing in return except friendship. The thought of anyone attacking them made Sarah's blood boil. "How long to reach them?" she asked. Deep Current's tentacles danced over his controls. 6 hours at maximum speed, Captain Friend Sarah. "Do it. And send word to the Coalition fleet. Tell them we're responding to the emergency." The Defiance changed course, its engines pushing harder than regulation allowed. Sarah didn't care about regulations when friends were in danger. Around her, the mixed crew worked with practiced efficiency. Humans, Cathara, Deep Swim, and Zephyrian hands, or claws, or tentacles, moved. Over controls with perfect coordination. As they traveled, more reports came in. The attacks weren't random raids. Entire Verdani colonies had gone silent. The few survivors spoke of ships that seemed to eat light itself, weapons that drained power from everything they touched. "These attackers," Sarah said to her crew. "Have we seen anything like this before?" Clictas's antenna twitched nervously. "No records in Coalition database, Captain Friend. Their technology appears to absorb energy rather than generate it." "Most concerning?" added Harmony, her crystalline form flickering with worried light patterns. "Coalition weapons rely on energy projection. If these attackers can drain power..." Sarah nodded grimly. She understood the implication. The Coalition's peaceful nature meant their military technology focused on disabling, rather than destroying. Energy weapons that could stun or disable enemies without permanent harm. If these new attackers could absorb energy, the Coalition fleet would be nearly defenseless. When they finally reached the Verdani system, the sight that greeted them was heartbreaking. 12 agricultural worlds had supported billions of Verdani. Now only 4 planets showed any signs of life, and those were fading fast. The Defiance dropped out of faster-than-light travel near Verdani Prime, the system's main world. What should have been a green and growing planet now looked brown and withered. Massive burn scars marked the surface where cities once stood. "Life signs?" Sarah asked. Deep Current's voice was heavy with sorrow. "Scattered survivors, Captain Friend. Perhaps 50,000 across the entire planet." Sarah closed her eyes for a moment. 50,000 survivors from a world that once held 50 million. Verdani. The mathematics of genocide were simple and horrible. Take us down to the largest survivor group, she ordered. The Defiance landed in what had been a vast garden city. Now it was ash and twisted metal. The landing party found a group of 200 Verdani huddled in the ruins of their central growing complex. The plant-like beings looked like walking trees, but these survivors were withered and brown, their bark-like skin cracked with stress. Elder Root of Deep Wisdom approached them, moving slowly on legs that shook with exhaustion. "Human friends," the Verdani wheezed through his trunk-like mouth. "You came. We hoped but feared none would arrive in time. We're here now," Sarah said gently. "Tell me what happened." The elder's account was disturbing. Ships had appeared without warning, black vessels that seemed to bend light around them. They had demanded immediate surrender of all Verdani worlds. When the peaceful Verdani tried to negotiate, the attackers had opened fire. "Their weapons," Root of Deep Wisdom said, his voice barely a whisper. "They drained the life from our world cities. Our power systems failed. Our defensive satellites went dark. Even our emergency systems could not function." "Did they say who they were? What they wanted?" "They called themselves the Hegemony. They said surrender or die. When we asked for time to consider, they began the burning. 12 worlds, human friend Sarah. 12 worlds of growing things turned to ash in 3 days. Sarah felt something cold and hard settle in her chest. She had seen tragedy before, natural disasters, accidents, the occasional pirate raid. But this was different. This was deliberate cruelty on a scale that made her soul ache. "Are there other survivors?" she asked. "Some, hidden in deep roots in underground growing chambers. Maybe 1 million across all our worlds, from 50 billion. The elders' branches drooped. They said they would return in 1 local month. If we had not surrendered by then, they would finish what they started." Sarah looked around at her crew. She saw her own anger reflected in their faces. Even the normally calm Zephyrian was flickering with rapid, agitated light patterns. "We'll get you out of here," Sarah promised. "All of you, and we'll make sure this doesn't happen again." As the Defiance lifted off with as many survivors as they could carry, Sarah stood again on her bridge. But now she wasn't looking at stars with wonder. She was looking at them with the calculating gaze of a predator planning a hunt. "Set course for Coalition headquarters," she ordered. "Maximum speed." "Yes, Captain Friend," Deep Current replied, but his usual cheerful tone was gone, replaced by something harder. As they traveled, more reports came in. The Hegemony hadn't stopped with the Verdani. Talon's warrior worlds were under attack. Shepherd Library planets burned. The peaceful species of the Coalition were being systematically destroyed by an enemy their weapons couldn't touch. Sarah thought about the Elder's words. 1 month. The Hegemony had given the survivors 1 month to surrender completely. They had no idea what they had just awakened. Humanity had spent 50 years learning to be peaceful neighbors in a gentle galaxy. But they had not forgotten the lessons learned in the crucible of their violent homeworld. Some skills could be set aside but never truly lost. The Hegemony was about to learn why humans were the only species to survive multiple extinction events on their planet. They were about to discover what happened when you threatened humanity's friends. The hunt was about to begin. The Great Council Chamber on Coalition Station had never seen such chaos. Representatives from 67 different species filled the circular hall, and most of them were shouting at once. The air translation systems struggled to keep up with the flood of languages, creating a confusing mix of clicks, whistles, harmonics, and words. Admiral Rodriguez stood quietly at the human delegation's position, listening to each report. His weathered face showed no emotion, but his aide noticed the Admiral's hands clenched tighter with each new tragedy described. 17 Talon worlds lost, roared General Sharpclaw, the proud warrior's feathers bristling with rage. Our finest battle fleets destroyed. Their weapons drain our ship's power. Our claws cannot reach enemies who fight from shadows. The Talon were known throughout the galaxy as fierce warriors who had never lost a major battle. To see Sharpclaw admit defeat sent fear through the chamber like a cold wind. High Librarian Mindkeeper of the Shepherds spoke next, his ancient voice heavy with grief. 3 library worlds burn, 10,000 years of collected knowledge, lost, forever. The hegemony does not just kill, they erase. They want no trace of our civilization to survive. The Shepherds were the galaxy's historians and teachers. Their libraries held the cultural treasures of every coalition species. The thought of such knowledge being destroyed forever made even the newest coalition members weep. Chancellor Flow Like River of the Deep Swim added her voice to the tragedy. 43 of our deep-sea colonies have gone silent. The hegemony's ships somehow drain the power from our underwater cities. My people suffocate in the darkness of their own homes. Report after report came in. The crystalline Zephyrians had lost their singing moon cities. The gas-breathing vortex found their atmospheric processors failing as hegemony weapons drained power. The peaceful gardeners watched their bioships wither and die when touched by the enemy's dark energy. Ambassador Prime Root spoke for the surviving Verdani. Our analysis confirms what we feared. The hegemony's technology absorbs energy from any source. Our weapons feed their ships. Our defenses strengthen their attacks. Conventional coalition tactics are useless. Fear filled the chamber like poison gas. These were species that had lived in peace for centuries. War was something they studied in history books, not something they experienced. The coalition military existed mainly to rescue people from disasters and protect trade routes from the occasional pirate. Now they faced an enemy designed to counter their every strength. "What do they want?" asked Eldest Song of the Harmony, her telepathic voice reaching every mind in the chamber. "Why do they attack without warning or demand?" The answer came from the chamber's main display. A message had been intercepted from hegemony forces, broadcast on all frequencies so no one could miss it. The figure that appeared was humanoid but wrong somehow. Its skin was too pale, its eyes too black, its smile too wide. When it spoke, its words carried the weight of absolute certainty. "Greetings, lesser species of this galactic region. I am Overlord Prime of the hegemony. We have come to bring order to your chaos, purpose to your meaningless existence." The figure's black eyes seemed to look directly at each viewer. "For too long you have wasted the resources of hundreds of worlds with your primitive concepts of cooperation and peace. Under hegemony rule, every world will serve its proper function. Every species will contribute to the greater purpose. You have seen demonstrations of our power on the worlds of several species. This was not cruelty. It was education. Learn from their examples. Resistance leads only to extinction." The Overlord's smile grew wider, showing too many teeth. "You have 1 standard galactic month to surrender unconditionally. Any world that has not submitted by then will be cleansed of life to make room for proper hegemony colonization. Any species that resists will be added to our museums as an example of evolutionary failure." The message ended, leaving the chamber in stunned silence. It was Chancellor Deep Thought of the Philosophers who spoke first. "They offer no terms, no negotiations. Only total surrender or complete extinction. Their technology makes resistance impossible," added General Sharpclaw, his warrior pride broken. "How do we fight ships that grow stronger when we attack them?" "We run," said Trademaster Quick Prophet of the Merchants. "We take what we can. Carry and flee to distant galaxies, let them have these stars. And abandon billions who cannot flee?" Prime Root's bark-like skin flushed with anger. "Leave countless worlds to die while we run like cowards?" The arguments began again, louder and more desperate than before. Some species wanted to surrender immediately and hope for mercy. Others demanded they fight regardless of the cost. A few suggested trying to negotiate with the hegemony, despite their clear refusal to bargain. Through it all, Admiral Rodriguez remained silent. He had been listening to the reports for 6 hours now. 43 species had lost homeworlds. Hundreds of colonies were ash. Billions of innocent beings were dead, and billions more would die in the next month. The coalition had been humanity's greatest gift. For 50 years, humans had known peace among the stars. They had learned that not every problem required violence to solve. They had grown to love these strange, wonderful alien friends who showed them new ways to live. Now those friends were dying, and their killers were coming for Earth next. Admiral Rodriguez, the Prime Counselor's voice cut through the arguing. Earth has been silent through these discussions. What is humanity's position? The chamber fell quiet. Every alien eye, sensor, and attention turned toward the human delegation. Some looked hopeful. Humans were known for finding creative solutions to impossible problems. Others looked apologetic, as if already forgiving humanity for whatever practical decision they were about to make. Rodriguez stood slowly. He was not a tall man, but something in his posture made him seem to fill the chamber. When he spoke, his voice was quiet but somehow reached every corner of the great hall. In human history, we have a saying, he began. We remember our friends. He looked around the chamber, making eye contact with representatives he had worked with for years. 50 years ago, you welcomed us when we were new to space. You taught us your ways. You shared your worlds. You became our friends. The Admiral's voice grew harder. Friends help friends. Friends protect friends. And friends never forget when someone hurts their friends. He stood straighter. And for a moment, every being in the chamber remembered that humans came from a world where they had fought their way to the top of the food chain. The hegemony believes they have seen what the coalition can do. They have not seen what humanity can do. Admiral, interrupted Chancellor Deep Thought, surely you understand the tactical situation. Your ships use the same energy-based systems as ours. The hegemony's power-draining technology will be countered, Rodriguez said simply. Humans have fought wars for thousands of years. We have faced impossible odds before. We have been outgunned, outnumbered, and outmatched. We are still here. He gestured toward the display where the Overlord's message had played. This hegemony thinks they know war. They know conquest. They know how to break civilized species who fight by civilized rules. The Admiral's smile was not pleasant. They have never faced a species that survived by learning to break anything that threatened it. They have never fought humans who are truly angry. What is Earth's official response? Asked the Prime Counselor. Rodriguez was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, every being in the chamber felt a chill that had nothing to do with temperature. Tell the hegemony they have made a mistake. They attacked our friends. They killed beings we care about. They threatened our family. He turned toward the great display showing the current positions of coalition and hegemony forces. Earth does not negotiate with genocidal murderers. Earth does not surrender to bullies. Earth does not run from fights. Rodriguez looked back at the chamber full of alien representatives, friends he had worked with, laughed with, shared meals with for years. Earth goes to war. The chamber erupted in voices again, but this time they were not panicked. Some species began volunteering their remaining resources to support human efforts. Others offered intelligence on hegemony movements. A few asked what they could do to help. But Rodriguez was already walking toward the chamber's exit. He had calls to make. Earth's military had been in peacekeeping mode for 50 years, but every human ship could be converted back to war configuration within days. More importantly, Earth had not forgotten how to build weapons designed to kill rather than disable. The hegemony had 1 month to finish their conquest. They thought they were facing the same gentle coalition that had tried to fight them with stunning weapons and polite tactics. Instead, they were about to meet the species that had survived ice ages, asteroid impacts, and 10,000 years of fighting each other. They were about to discover what happened when you made humans choose between their friends and their enemies. The choice was simple. The war was about to begin. The first sign that something had changed came 3 days after Admiral Rodriguez's declaration. Coalition sensors detected massive energy signatures near the edge of Verdani space, not the dark, power-draining signatures of hegemony ships, but the bright, clean burns of human faster-than-light drives. What emerged from hyperspace defied every expectation. The UES Washington was a museum piece, a warship from humanity's early space age that should have been scrapped decades ago. Instead, someone had retrofitted it with modern engines and weapons. It was followed by the Shanghai, the Lagos, and the Mumbai, all ancient warships pulled from Earth's naval museums and made combat ready in less than 72 hours. Behind them came converted civilian ships, mining vessels with improvised armor plating and massive industrial lasers, cargo haulers carrying thousands of troops and enough supplies for a long campaign. Even pleasure craft had been pressed into service as fast scouts and communication relays. Captain Sarah Chen watched the growing human fleet from the bridge of the Defiance. In 3 days, more human ships had arrived in Coalition space than she had seen in her entire career. They kept coming, hundreds, then thousands of vessels streaming in from every direction. Captain Friend Sarah, Deep Current spoke from his navigation station. I count over 2,000 human ships in this system alone. This exceeds the entire Coalition fleet size by a factor of 4. Sarah nodded grimly. She had expected Earth to respond, but this was beyond anything she had imagined. It was as if every human ship in the galaxy had received the same message. Friends are in danger, come now. Incoming transmission from the Washington, reported Harmony. Admiral Chen requests all human ships prepare for tactical briefing. Sarah blinked in surprise. Admiral Chen was her older sister, pulled out of retirement to command this improvised fleet. Elena had been one of Earth's finest military minds before the long peace began. Now it seemed the long peace was over. The tactical briefing was unlike anything the Coalition had ever seen. Where alien military planning focused on minimizing casualties and avoiding damage to civilian infrastructure, the human approach was brutally simple. The hegemony's advantage comes from their energy-draining technology, Admiral Elena Chen explained to the assembled captains. They expect us to use energy weapons like the rest of the Coalition. Instead, we give them what they don't expect: kinetic weapons, chemical explosives, and good old-fashioned nuclear warheads. She gestured to the tactical display showing hegemony positions. Their ships can absorb energy, but they can't absorb a tungsten rod moving at significant fractions of light speed. They can drain power systems, but they can't drain the kinetic energy of a missile that's already been fired. The human fleet had brought weapons the Coalition had never needed. Railguns that used electromagnetic force to fire solid projectiles at incredible speeds. Missiles with chemical warheads that needed no power systems to detonate. Nuclear weapons that released energy through atomic fusion rather than external power sources. Most importantly, they brought the human approach to warfare, an approach that had evolved on a world where extinction events were common and survival meant being more stubborn than anything trying to kill you. The first engagement came when a hegemony scouting fleet encountered human ships near the ruins of a Verdani colony. The alien ships immediately began their energy-draining attacks, expecting to disable the human vessels as easily as they had disabled Coalition forces. Instead, they found themselves facing enemies who had never heard that energy weapons were the civilized way to fight. The UES Yamamoto opened fire with chemical propellant cannons that had been obsolete for centuries, but worked perfectly when enemy ships couldn't drain their power. The hegemony ships designed to absorb energy attacks had no defense against solid projectiles moving at tremendous speeds. Within minutes, 3 hegemony vessels were drifting wrecks, their hulls torn open by weapons their technology couldn't counter. But the real shock came when the surviving hegemony ships tried to retreat. Human doctrine didn't allow retreats when friends had been murdered. The converted mining ship Prospector launched a spread of nuclear missiles. The hegemony ships tried to drain their power, but nuclear weapons didn't need external power to detonate. The explosions lit up space like tiny suns, reducing the fleeing enemy ships to radioactive debris. Across the battlefield, a message was broadcast on all frequencies in perfect hegemony language. Earth remembers. Word of the human victory spread through both Coalition and hegemony space at the speed of light. The Coalition species felt hope for the first time in weeks. Perhaps the hegemony could be beaten after all. The hegemony forces felt something they had never experienced before: uncertainty. The humans, meanwhile, were just getting started. Captain Sarah Chen led a mixed fleet of human and alien ships to the Kythera homeworld, where hegemony forces were preparing to finish off the insectoid species. The attack that followed became known as the Hive War, not because of the Kythera's insect-like society, but because human ships swarmed the enemy like angry bees defending their nest. The humans had spent 3 days studying captured hegemony technology. They learned that the energy-draining systems had a maximum capacity. They could absorb enormous amounts of power, but they could be overloaded. More importantly, the systems had a brief recharge cycle between absorptions. Human tactical doctrine adapted instantly. Ships would fire in precisely timed waves, overloading hegemony defenses, then switching to kinetic weapons during the recharge period. It required split-second timing and absolute coordination between hundreds of ships. The humans pulled it off perfectly. The Battle of Kythera lasted 18 hours. When it ended, 27 hegemony ships had been destroyed, and not a single human vessel had been lost. The surviving Kythera workers emerged from their underground hives to find their world liberated by the same humans who had once helped them rebuild after volcanic disasters. But liberation was not enough for humanity. The turning point came when hegemony forces made a critical mistake. A refugee convoy carrying Kythera children and Verdani survivors was fleeing toward Coalition space when hegemony ships intercepted it. The alien commanders demanded the refugees surrender for processing into slave labor. When the convoy's escorts, 3 small Coalition patrol ships, tried to protect the civilians, the hegemony forces opened fire on the refugee transports. 15,000 children and civilians died in the first minutes of the attack. The human response was swift and merciless. Every human ship within 3 light years changed course toward the attack site. They arrived to find the hegemony ships systematically, destroying escape pods to prevent any survivors from testifying about the massacre. What followed was not a battle. It was an execution. The humans had learned exactly which hegemony ships were responsible for the refugee convoy's destruction. They had tracked the ship's energy signatures, recorded their commanders' voices, and identified their home fleet. Now they hunted those specific ships across 3 star systems with the patience of Earth's apex predators. One by one, the guilty ships were cornered and destroyed. The humans didn't just kill them quickly. They disabled each ship first, broadcasting the names of the dead children on all frequencies, then asking the hegemony crews if they remembered ordering those murders. When each ship was finally destroyed, the same message was sent: Earth remembers. The psychological effect on hegemony forces was profound. They had conquered dozens of species by demonstrating overwhelming technological superiority and ruthless efficiency. They had never faced an enemy that responded to atrocity with systematic revenge. For the first time in their history, hegemony ships began retreating without orders. Admiral Elena Chen studied the intelligence reports with grim satisfaction. They're pulling back to defensive positions around their core worlds. They think they can wait us out behind their heavy fortifications. Can they? Asked Sarah during a secure communication between sister commanders. Elena's smile would have frightened a shark. They still don't understand what they're fighting. They think this is about military objectives and territorial control. She gestured toward a display showing the locations of destroyed refugee convoys, burned Coalition worlds, and mass graves on conquered planets. This stopped being a military conflict the moment they decided to commit genocide against our friends. What do you mean? I mean, Elena said quietly, that they're not fighting the Coalition anymore. They're not even fighting the human military. They're fighting the entire human species, and we've decided they don't get to exist. Reports began filtering in from human space that confirmed Elena's words. Earth's shipyards were working around the clock, building not just warships but specialized vessels designed for only one purpose: hunting hegemony forces. Civilian corporations were retrofitting their entire fleets for combat operations. Even Earth's vast entertainment industry had mobilized, creating propaganda broadcasts explaining to human children why their parents had gone to fight in distant stars. Humanity had not just gone to war. Humanity had chosen a side in a fight between civilization and genocide, and they were bringing the full weight of their species to bear on that choice. The hegemony had demanded surrender within 1 month. They had 3 weeks left to live. 2 weeks into the war, the hegemony learned what humans meant when they said they adapted. The initial victories had been impressive but limited. Human ships could destroy hegemony vessels in direct combat, but the enemy still held hundreds of occupied worlds and had massive reinforcements arriving from their home territory. Military analysts on both sides expected a long, grinding conflict that could last years. Then humanity showed them what it meant to fight a species that had evolved by solving problems instead of following patterns. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Dr. Lisa Park was not a military scientist. She was a xenobiologist who studied alien plant life. But when she heard that hegemony energy-draining technology was based on living organisms, she requested samples from destroyed enemy ships. What she found changed everything. The power absorption isn't technology, she explained to the assembled fleet commanders via holographic transmission. It's biology. The hegemony ships use engineered parasitic organisms that feed on energy. They're essentially flying stomachs. Admiral Elena Chen leaned forward in interest. Can you kill the organisms? Better than that. I can make them sick. Doctor. Park's solution was elegantly simple. Earth's biological warfare research had been banned for centuries, but the techniques were well documented. She created a viral agent that infected the hegemony's energy-feeding organisms, causing them to become violently ill and release all stored energy at once. The first test came when human ships encountered a hegemony patrol near the destroyed Verdani system. Instead of opening fire immediately, the humans launched what appeared to be sensor probes. The hegemony ships ignored the small devices, focusing on the main fleet. Minutes later, every hegemony ship in the battle group began exploding from the inside out as their own energy-draining systems turned against them. Biological warfare, Admiral Rodriguez observed from Coalition headquarters. I should have expected that. But Dr. Park's virus was just the beginning. Human innovation accelerated as the war continued, with new solutions appearing faster than the hegemony could counter them. The Techno-Industrial Corporation, Earth's largest manufacturing company, developed self-replicating mining robots that could strip resources from asteroids and build weapons in space. Within days, human supply lines became completely mobile. The fleet could manufacture everything it needed without returning to base. The Entertainment Media Consortium created psychological warfare broadcasts designed to demoralize hegemony forces. The aliens had never encountered an enemy that attacked their will to fight as systematically as their ships. Human propaganda portrayed the hegemony as incompetent failures who couldn't even conquer primitives who had just learned to travel between stars. Most effective of all was the Human Archaeological Survey, which began targeting hegemony cultural sites. If the hegemony wanted to erase the history and culture of coalition species, humanity would return the favor. You're burning their museums, Captain Sarah Chen observed during a tactical briefing. Their art galleries, their monuments, their holy sites, their historical archives, their cultural centers, Admiral Elena confirmed. Every trace of their civilization that doesn't involve killing people. That's... Sarah paused, looking for words. That's remarkably vindictive. They murdered children, Sarah. They committed genocide against species whose only crime was being friendly to us. Elena's voice was cold as deep space. Vindictive doesn't begin to cover what we're being. The psychological effect on hegemony forces was devastating. They had built their entire society around the belief that they were the superior species destined to rule the galaxy. Now they faced enemies who casually dismantled everything they held sacred, while treating their advanced military technology like an amusing puzzle to be solved. More importantly, humanity's approach began inspiring their alien allies in ways no one had expected. The surviving Kithera workers, grateful for their liberation, began modifying their industrial technology into weapons. Their four-armed precision and hive-mind coordination let them build devices human engineers couldn't even imagine. Soon, human ships were carrying Kithera-designed weapons that turned hegemony armor into metal-eating acid. The aquatic deep swim revealed that their peaceful nature had hidden tremendous courage. When human ships needed crews for captured hegemony vessels, thousands of deep swim volunteered to learn human combat techniques. Their ability to think in 3 dimensions made them naturally gifted space pilots. Even the crystalline Zephyrians found ways to contribute. Their long-distance communication abilities let human fleets coordinate across entire star systems without any chance of enemy interception. More importantly, their crystalline bodies could process certain types of radiation that were lethal to other species, making them perfect for operating in the radioactive wreckage of destroyed hegemony facilities. The war evolved from a desperate defense into a coordinated multi-species offensive that played to everyone's strengths. Humans provided the strategic thinking and industrial capacity. Kythera built precision weapons and provided coordination. Deep Swim piloted ships and provided tactical mobility. Zephyrians handled communications and operated in hazardous environments. The hegemony, who had conquered dozens of species by exploiting their individual weaknesses, found themselves facing an alliance where each species compensated for the others. Limitations. "It's beautiful in a terrifying way," observed Chancellor Deep Thought during a coalition council meeting. "Humans have taken our greatest weakness, our diversity, and made it our greatest strength." The turning point came during the Battle of the Twin Suns, where a massive hegemony fleet attempted to break through to coalition core worlds. The enemy force included over 300 ships and was led by Overlord Prime himself, the same being who had delivered the original surrender ultimatum. The human response was swift and overwhelming. Instead of meeting the hegemony fleet with an equal force, humanity deployed everything they had learned in 2 weeks of war. Biological warfare viruses infected hegemony ships before the battle even began. Kythera built weapon systems targeted the specific weak points in enemy armor that human analysis had identified. Deep Swim pilots flew captured hegemony ships loaded with nuclear warheads directly into enemy formations. Zephyrian communication networks coordinated the entire battle across light hours of space in real time. But the most effective weapon was something no one had planned for: pure human stubbornness. When Overlord Prime's flagship proved too heavily defended for conventional attack, Captain Maria Santos of the converted cargo ship Persistence simply rammed it at nearly light speed. The kinetic energy release was visible from 3 star systems away. Other human ships followed her example. If conventional weapons couldn't penetrate enemy defenses, humans used their ships as weapons. If the enemy's technology was too advanced to counter, humans ignored it and used brute force instead. If hegemony tactics were too sophisticated to predict, humans simply refused to follow any tactics at all. The Battle of the Twin Suns lasted 6 hours. When it ended, the hegemony had lost over 200 ships, including Overlord Prime's flagship. Human losses were significant: 47 ships destroyed, including several that had deliberately sacrificed themselves to take out higher-value targets. But the strategic result was decisive. The hegemony's main offensive fleet was broken. Their supreme commander was dead, and every surviving hegemony ship had received the same message broadcast on all frequencies. "This is Admiral Elena Chen of Earth's military forces. You have 3 days to evacuate all Coalition worlds and return to your own territory. Any hegemony ship found in Coalition space after that deadline will be destroyed. Any hegemony facility found to contain evidence of war crimes will be sterilized. This is not a negotiation. This is not a surrender offer. This is a statement of what will happen. Earth remembers our friends, and Earth never forgives the murder of children." The message was broadcast in 17 different languages, including several that humans had learned specifically to communicate with hegemony subject species. Those enslaved aliens heard for the first time in their lives someone promising to free them from their oppressors. Across hegemony space, slave revolts began to spread. The tide had turned, but humanity was not interested in simply winning the war. They wanted to win it so decisively that no one would ever threaten their friends again. The final assault on the hegemony core worlds began exactly 1 month after their original ultimatum expired. Admiral Elena Chen had kept her promise. Any hegemony ship found in Coalition space after the deadline had been destroyed. Now it was time to finish what the enemy had started. The human fleet that gathered for the final push was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Over 5,000 ships formed the main battle group, representing not just Earth's military, but the combined industrial might of an entire species that had decided genocide would not stand. Alongside them flew the rebuilt fleets of their allies. Cathara engineering ships that could construct weapons in real time during battle. Deep-swim vessels that moved through space like schools of fish, impossible to predict or counter. Zephyrian communication ships that let the entire force coordinate as if it were a single mind. The Verdani survivors contributed too. Their bioships, regrown from seeds preserved in deep storage, carried weapons unlike anything seen before. Living, projectiles that could adapt to enemy defenses, biological computers that could outthink hegemony targeting systems. But the most important ships in the fleet were the ones that shouldn't have existed at all. Status report on the Remembrance. Ships, Admiral Elena requested from the bridge of the newly constructed UES Vengeance. All 47 vessels operational and ready, her aide replied. Each one carries the name of a destroyed coalition world and full documentation of hegemony war crimes committed there. The Remembrance ships were Admiral Elena's personal contribution to the war. Each vessel had been built as a memorial to a world the hegemony had destroyed, carrying the names of the dead and recordings of their final messages. They would serve as both weapons and witnesses to ensure the galaxy never forgot what had happened. The approach to hegemony space revealed the full scope of their enemy's empire. Hundreds of worlds orbited systems that had been strip-mined for resources. Billions of enslaved beings labored in conditions that made death seem like mercy. Entire species had been reduced to servitude so complete that they had forgotten their own names. It was, Admiral Elena realized, exactly what would have happened to the coalition if humanity hadn't intervened. The first major engagement came at the hegemony border fortress of Dominion Prime. The massive space station was larger than most moons, and defended by energy-draining technology so advanced it could absorb the power output of entire stars. The human response was characteristically direct. All ships, Elena broadcast to the fleet, implement Protocol Omega. Protocol Omega was simple. If enemy defenses could absorb unlimited energy, don't give them energy to absorb. Instead, give them solid matter moving at significant fractions of light speed. The human fleet opened fire with kinetic weapons that had been specifically designed for this moment. Tungsten rods, depleted uranium shells, and solid metal projectiles launched by magnetic acceleration struck Dominion Prime at speeds that turned matter into plasma on impact. The fortress's energy absorption systems were useless against kinetic attacks. Its massive shields, designed to absorb the power of suns, crumpled like paper against simple metal moving very fast. Within an hour, Dominion Prime was a cloud of expanding debris. Broadcast the standard message, Elena ordered. Across all frequencies in every language used by hegemony subject species, the same words rang out. This is the human fleet. We are here to free you from your oppressors. Cooperate with liberation forces and you will be protected. Resist and you will be treated as enemies. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Slave revolts erupted on dozens of worlds. Entire hegemony garrison fleets found themselves fighting their own former victims. Subject species that had served the hegemony for generations suddenly remembered they had once been free. But not all enemies were willing to surrender. The second overlord, Prime's successor, made the mistake of trying to negotiate from a position of strength. His message reached the human fleet as they approached the hegemony capital system. Human commanders. The second overlord's voice was smooth and confident. You have demonstrated impressive tactical ability. Perhaps we can reach an accommodation. The hegemony is willing to withdraw from all coalition territory and provide significant compensation for damages. Admiral Elena's response was broadcast to every ship in both fleets. Second Overlord, this is Admiral Elena Chen. I will explain our position once clearly, so there can be no misunderstanding. Your forces murdered billions of civilians. You committed genocide against peaceful species. You enslaved entire worlds. You killed children. Elena paused, letting the silence stretch across space. There will be no accommodation. There will be no negotiation. There will be no mercy. You wanted to rule the galaxy through fear and superior technology. Now you face a species that built its civilization by killing anything that threatened it. You wanted to demonstrate the consequences of resistance. Now learn the consequences of threatening humanity's friends. Surrender unconditionally and you will be given fair trials before your executions. Continue fighting, and we will erase every trace of your civilization from the galaxy. You have 1 hour to decide. The second overlord's response was to open fire with every weapon the hegemony capital system possessed. The Battle of Hegemony Prime lasted 3 days and nights. It was less a battle than a systematic dismantling of everything the hegemony had built over centuries of conquest. Human ships, coordinated by Zephyrian communications and armed with Cathera weapons, tore through hegemony defenses like a force of nature. Deep swim pilots flew suicide missions into enemy fortifications while broadcasting the names of murdered coalition civilians. Verdani bioships released weapons that turned hegemony technology against itself, but it was humanity's systematic approach to the destruction that truly terrified their enemies. The humans didn't just destroy military targets. They cataloged every hegemony facility, identified its purpose, and demolished it with the appropriate level of force. Weapons factories were nuclear sterilized. Government buildings were reduced to their component atoms. Cultural sites were carefully documented. Before being erased, most disturbing of all, humans recorded everything. Every destroyed facility, every dead hegemony leader, every freed slave world was documented with the thoroughness of accountants balancing books. The galaxy would have a complete record of exactly how the hegemony had been dismantled. On the third day, the second overlord's fortress ship was cornered by 3 remembrance vessels. The UES Verdani Prime, UES Cathera 7, and UES Children of Deep Stars surrounded the massive vessel and broadcast a final message. Second Overlord, this is Captain Maria Vasquez of the UES Children of Deep Stars. This ship carries the names of 15,000 children and civilians your forces murdered at the refugee convoy. Before we destroy you, we want you to hear some of those names. For the next hour, the human ships broadcast the name and age of every being who had died in the refugee convoy massacre. 15,000 names, read slowly and clearly, while the second overlord's ship drifted helpless with its weapon systems, destroyed. When the last name was read, all 3 remembrance ships fired simultaneously. The second overlord's final transmission was a scream of rage and terror that cut off mid-syllable. With the death of their leadership and the destruction of their capital system, hegemony resistance collapsed across dozens of star systems. Some garrison commanders tried to negotiate local surrenders. Others attempted to flee to distant galaxies. A few tried to destroy their own facilities rather than let them fall into human hands. None of those options were acceptable to humanity. Systematic elimination of hegemony infrastructure continued for 6 months. Every military facility was destroyed. Every government installation was demolished. Every cultural site that glorified conquest was erased. The humans were not just winning a war. They were editing a species out of galactic history. But they were also something else. Liberators. On each freed world, human forces arrived with supplies, medical aid, and most importantly, the records they had kept of each species' original culture. The hegemony had tried to erase the identities of their slave species. Humanity returned their names, their languages, their histories. The final act came when the last hegemony holdouts attempted to use their remaining enslaved populations as hostages. Their message was simple: withdraw or watch billions die, Admiral. Elena's response became legendary throughout the galaxy.
All hegemony forces, this is Admiral Elena Chen. You have made your final mistake. Humans do not negotiate with hostage takers. Humans do not retreat when innocents are threatened. Humans do not accept that anyone must die to save anyone else. We
are not withdrawing. We are not negotiating. We are coming for every single one of you, and we will free every single being you hold prisoner. You wanted to learn what happens when you threaten humanity's friends. Class is now in session. The rescue operations that followed redefined what the galaxy thought was possible. Human forces infiltrated fortified worlds, liberated prison camps, and extracted enslaved populations from facilities that should have been impregnable. They lost thousands of their own people in the process, but they kept their promise. Every hostage was freed. Every enslaved being was liberated. Every hegemony facility was destroyed.